Welcome back to Unbroken Arrows. As always, I'm Catherine.
And I'm Greg.
And today we have Marty Dewitt. Marty is a local photographer and has been a park ranger in both Vermont and South Dakota.
And I met Marty at the Thursday Talk series at Good Earth State Park, just outside of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So welcome, Marty. Thank you for being our guest.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
Question for you. You have been a park ranger in both Vermont and South Dakota, and you are retired now. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I retired back in, 2011, actually, after about 32 years with the South Dakota State Park System. And prior to that, it was I spent 7 seasons with the Vermont State Parks, starting back in the 70s. So worn a lot of hats in state park agencies over that 40-year span.
Oh, sure. And what were the agencies that you were associated with here in South Dakota?
Well, I was with the Department of Game, Fish, and Parks. So in the Parks Division, the Parks and Recreation Division, that's the division that manages all the state parks, recreation areas, nature areas, historic sites here in South Dakota. Pretty much a companion agency to what a lot of different states have. But their whole role their mission is outdoor recreation, whereas the game and fish part, that's the wildlife hunting, fishing, and other outdoor activities. So as a state agency, it encompasses a lot of outdoor recreation opportunities for the state.
Would you also take just a minute or two and provide an overview for the presentation that you gave at Good Earth? Because one of the things that we try to focus on with our Unbroken Arrows podcast is getting active in the outdoors, and that's what struck me when I attended your presentation was, this is a possible way for someone who would want to be outdoors, and maybe not really have the desire to hunt, but with the camera, you are hunting, I guess. But could you just provide a quick overview of what your presentation was about?
Well, I've, over the years, of course, I've done many, many different programs and workshops and presentations on outdoor photography, but this one was a little different. Probably over the last 4 or 5 years, I've kind of taken a little bit more of an introspective look on, my photography and that of others. I follow a lot of other photographers throughout the years for, different inspirations. And so I often get asked the question, well, what makes you tick? I mean, what are you thinking about when you're setting out to take a picture or to capture some images or whatever? And so I kind of took a little bit of a deep dive back into my thought process and how I pre-visualize and how I kind of predict what I want to do, and that ultimately ended up in a presentation to kind of give people a sense of what goes through a photographer's mind as they approach whatever subject. It doesn't matter whether you're a wedding or a portrait photographer, whether you're into sports action, whether you're a landscape and scenic photographer, or much like me, a wildlife and nature photographer. You have to have some idea of what you're after. Granted, many times it doesn't come to fruition, but you find something else along the way in the journey, and that's the beauty of it. There are some times where you set out with a specific goal in mind, and you just have to be receptive to whatever presents itself. And recently, just this last week, a number of us were up in northern Minnesota at a natural area, the Sax-Zim Bog, northwest of Duluth. And, our goal, our dream was to capture the great gray owl. And but as we scouted the area looking for the great gray owl, we encountered many other different species: the pine martens, the ermine, the red poles, and I mean a variety of northern hawk owls. We made all sorts of other discoveries along the way. So even if you're focused on a particular goal, You need to be receptive to those teachable moments or those opportunistic things. And so that's kind of where my presentation was going, to prepare yourself, because we say there's a lot of luck in photography, as in many outdoor activities. There's a lot of luck involved, but there's also a lot of things you can do to prepare or to improve your luck. So that's what the presentation was all about. What trips my trigger? What do I think about as I'm getting ready to, whether it's night sky photography, if I want to do light painting, if I'm specifically setting in a blind looking for a specific species of wildlife, if I'm just out looking for scenics, or if I'm just strolling through a junkyard. Those, the old automobile junkyards are the best places for some of those Art Deco and really neat artsy kinds of design elements. So I think you just open your perspective and be receptive to all those different subjects, and then you're ready. You'll score something. It's pretty typical. You won't come away empty-handed. It may not be what you set out for, but you'll come back with something good.
Right. I think we've actually had our first intersection with guests on our Unbroken Arrows podcast. The bog that you visited, could you give me the name of that again?
It's Sax-Zim Bog, Saxzim Bog.
Right. We interviewed a gentleman by the name of Dave Endicott, and he and his wife have a parcel of land that they open up for people that have been affected by suicide in their family, a camping area, and it's very close to that, because he mentioned that as an area that is renowned for birding in particular.
Right.
So sorry for that segue there, but that's kind of cool that we've had that intersection. And like I said, it's the first one that I think we've had. So.
Oh, cool. Well, I think, that's bound to happen. I mean, I think when you and I visited before, I mentioned how in many ways photography is a form of therapy for me. If I used to be, when I'd want, after a busy weekend in the parks or whatever, there's really nothing better than just to sneak out into the woods and sit on a log with your camera and just watch and wait. And it's just a good time to kind of recover and renew. And I found that to be the case for many, many years. And so some of these excursions that we often take off on, whether it's just individually or with a small group from our club or just friends, we've got kind of a nice circle of folks that have like interests, and we learn from each other and we grow that way. So it's been a fun journey, and there's plenty of places. My wife and I have collectively visited, I think we're up to about 158 national parks and national park facilities, basically, or areas. That's the recreation areas and the nature areas and historic sites and that kind of thing. But we're closing in on 160 around the country. So we've seen a lot of this great country photographically, and I think there's like 360 more to go.
So you've got a few more to go there.
We've got a little job security there, I guess.
Well, I think Catherine would probably agree with you. Catherine is quite a accomplished amateur photographer as well, so I think she would probably agree that it's therapeutic. And
no, I love it. It's especially being able to capture the moments after. And Greg had talked to me a little bit about what all you do, and from my understanding, you mostly just do nature, landscapes, things like that.
Yeah, I used to think I was quite a generalist. I've shot weddings. I've done the formal. I've done senior portraits. I've done family portraits. I've done the sports in action. I've shot the rodeos at the Expo Center. I've shot a lot of different subject matter, but oftentimes that's either doing it gratis for a local organization or just helping out different marketing and promotional kinds of things for folks. I don't consider myself a professional by any means. You have to make a living at it to call yourself that. That's getting tough to do in the photography world. But so I tend to give my images away. I use them mostly for my workshops and my training and that type of thing. And so I've had to be, and since I teach the classes and all the different brands of cameras, I have to be familiar with the different subject matter and the different technologies. And so it's really helped me grow. I mean, I really feel that, I've become a pretty good resource for folks, if they have issues or questions, and it's been really helpful, to build my base of knowledge. But I am kind of a generalist, but my true love is nature, wildlife, and scenics, that type of thing. Yeah.
We will probably come back to the photography club several times here during this interview, but you mentioned the different things that you have photographed, like the rodeo and things like that. Is it fair to say that in the photography club that there are a variety of activities that the club shoots in terms of photography? Because not everybody's going to have the same interest per se in the photos that they take.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this has been an exciting year for the camera club. The Sioux Falls Camera Clubs, I think, has been going since the 30s. And so it's had a long standing presence here in the community, but it's always been a pretty small, a small, tight-knit group. This last year, I decided that we'd kind of spread our wings a little bit, and we suspended the annual dues. We just kind of made it free, and you all come and check us out, kind of thing. And as a result, the majority of our membership back in the day were very much nature-oriented, kind of outdoor photographers. We had a few traditional film and black and white photographers in the group just to kind of round it out. But this last year, we had an interesting thing happen, and our numbers have basically doubled. The size of our group has basically doubled in size, and now we've got involvement with some younger folks, some college folks have joined the ranks. We've got some film photographers that are still shooting 35 millimeter film, and then we've got some that really are into the smartphone photography. And so we've had to kind of broaden our outreach, but we represent the whole spectrum of photographers and abilities. We've even got a gentleman in our club that shoots wet plate photography with the old 5x7 field cameras like the 1860s. And he even has some 1800s lenses that he's using currently to do black and white photography of country churches and things like that. So we've got a wide base of experiences and abilities. And that's the beauty of the club. We're not professionals. We're all about education. And so that's what our meeting structure is. We meet first and third Tuesdays of each month from September through May. And the first meeting is an educational program where we have guest photographers come in on a variety of subjects. The second meeting is what we call a share night, where we collectively sit there and we discuss new techniques and new gadgets, new software, and we offer criticism and critique of images to just kind of help us each grow. And then from June, July, and August, we take off from our regular meeting schedule, and we hold a variety of different on-site kind of photo treks. In the past, we've done night sky shoots. We've set up shoots with models and classic car enthusiasts. So we've learned a little bit of portrait and close-up macro kinds of things. We've done miniature and toy photography. We've done we have a member that's their group is into the old classic military aircraft and the small planes, and so we've done some aerial shooting and static shooting of old restored warbirds. And so we shot the McCrossan's barrel races. And, for those folks that want to shoot eagles in flight or something like that, there's no better way to train yourself than to try. You got 8 seconds to get it right with a barrel run. So, we try to stretch people's horizons. We try to broaden their, get them out of their comfort zone and let them experience some things, and yet have a group of folks that they can, rely on for input and guidance. So that's really what our club is about. We also have a competitive aspect to it, where we compete on a regional basis with other camera clubs. And so we try to, really broaden the horizons. But the real substance of it is education, and to help us really improve our hobby, our craft of photography.
Okay. I wrote this question thinking primarily about animals and maybe likening photography to hunting. But as I listened to the different things that you've experienced, either personally or in the club, and teaching others, I think that it may be a little bit, my thinking was too narrow. I used to teach biology, and I taught a research class, and one of the sayings that comes up quite often is chance favors the prepared mind. And the question that I have is for you is, what types of things do you need to prepare for based upon your photography subject? Like when I was thinking animals, the different behaviors they have, and they're active during different times of the day. But that probably goes with just about anything, whether you're talking about rodeo or if you're talking about the warplanes you were talking about. You'd have to deal with sun angle, because you're not going to get to move those, right, when you're trying to take those photos. So what types of things do you have to prepare ahead of time for?
Well, with the analogy and the comparison to hunting, I mean, it's a perfect example. If you're going after a specific species, you really need to prepare and understand their habitat, their habits. Just like you said, what time of day are you likely, you're not going to find a typical tree-dwelling songbird out in the middle of the prairie. It's just, you need to understand where they're likely to be found, when they're likely to be active, and set yourself in a position to where, you're ready when that presence occurs. But there's also the technical aspect. Just like you've got a certain set of or type of equipment that you need for a certain type of hunting or fishing or outdoor recreation. It's equipment based. You have to have specific things for their tools. You have to have a specific tool for a specific job. And then you have to know how to run that tool. And nowadays, cameras are highly sophisticated computers with lenses. And so you have to have some familiarity with the different settings for the different lighting conditions. What lens is going to give you a better chance of catching that songbird or that porcupine or whatever it is you're after. What lens is going to be the ideal one for that? If you're doing wildflowers or lichens or mushrooms or butterflies or whatever, it's a different type of lens. So you have to understand your equipment. You have to have the correct tool for the job that you're doing. And then there's technique. If you're shooting eagles in flight, like several years ago, we spent quite a bit of time down at the Lewis and Clark Dam photographing the bald eagles as they were fishing. And that's a specific technique you have to develop, which is much like leading a pheasant as it bursts out of the prairie grass. And so there are very, very many similarities. You need to be familiar with the species you're after, have the tools you need to be ready for when it presents itself and know how to operate those tools. And if you've got all of that in sync, well, then your chances of coming away with some keepers is much better. Now, with the advent of what I think in some cases are extremes in photo editing capabilities, I always used to say that the digital photography tended to create a generation of lazy photographers, because now you got a computer doing everything for you, and it's very easy to get, reliant on the automatic modes, that type of thing. But then that leads to some frustration and inconsistencies in your exposures and whatnot. So the sooner you get off of the automatic and start taking charge of what the camera is doing and start telling the camera what to do, then it starts performing for you, rather than you just compromising and taking what the camera gives you. So there is some technical ability that is involved at some point in time when you get serious about whatever subject.
Sorry.
I think we've been upstaged.
Greg's pushing buttons.
I tried. Oh boy.
It's still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, Greg's pushing buttons.
Was that my signal that I went on too long?
No.
No, not at all.
Greg's trying to mute himself so that he can cough.
Yeah, this is a 60-year-old retired guy really messing things up. So now that...
Well, it's a good thing it's not live.
Well, now that you're...
Yeah.
It'd probably be funnier then.
Yeah, maybe so. Now I can actually cough, so I'll clear my throat. Because Catherine can now edit that out. It might
talk
make
about
it on
relying on technology.
The blooper reel.
Yeah.
Oh, funny.
Okay. Good grief.
So that being said, I've got a couple kind of questions about what exactly you are using for equipment. But first things first, as a kind of more amateur photographer, I've got one camera body, I've got a couple of lenses. What would be like your go-to camera for someone that's just wanting to get into it and kind of want something that they can use for nature, for sports, they're going on vacation and want to be able to take pictures of it? What camera and lens would you suggest for someone like that?
Okay. Of course, the camera industry has changed dramatically over the last couple of years. The earlier, what we called the DSLRs, the digital single lens reflex cameras, those are the cameras that you could change the lenses on, but they had a reflex mirror that you were looking through. When you look through the viewfinder, you're looking through a series of mirrors and out through the lens. The new technology has now eliminated that mirror and all the mechanical parts that went along with it. And so the bodies now have basically shrunk in size. They're more compact. The autofocus modes on them are so much more advanced and much more efficient and effective. And the lens selections, although they're very similar offerings in the lens selections, there's a broader range of zoom lenses now that are available, so that you can do more things with a single lens than what we used to be able to do. We used to have a kind of a different lens for everything we wanted to photograph. Well, now they've had zoom lenses for many years, but they've really advanced their capabilities. So in answer to your question, as far as somebody starting out, you need to think about what it is that you want to photograph. Again, it's like a tool belt. And there are certain starter cameras, entry-level cameras, that have basic zoom lenses that allow you to do a lot of different subjects pretty well. But if you want to get specifically into macro photography or sports photography or portrait photography or night sky, and you want to start specializing, then you need to add the tools that are designed to function specifically for those things. So a good starter mirrorless camera now would be a smaller crop sensor camera with maybe either a zoom lens that gives you like an 18 millimeter wide angle capability up to maybe 150 to 200 millimeter to give you a little telephoto to bring those distant objects closer. It's a nice one lens setup with a small camera. You're talking in that, could be in that $800 to $1,200 range probably. Canon's got a nice full line. I'm kind of a Canon loyalist. I've been shooting Canon products for, well, pretty much over 50 years now. But I'm also familiar, I spent about a dozen years shooting the Nikon platform. Sony has some excellent cameras as well. So you really need to kind of look over the different offerings. YouTube is your friend. There are a lot of folks out there in YouTube land that will give you reviews and tutorials on the different cameras for specific types of shooting, and they can help kind of guide your purchase. So there's, the online business has really done a number on the local camera store, unfortunately, and this is nationwide, not just locally, but certainly locally. At Harold's, we're still available. We're no longer a Nikon dealer, but we deal in Sony and Canon. But we have folks on staff that are Nikon shooters and have that experience and that expertise and are more than happy to sit down and visit and help you kind of make those choices and decisions. We also, like I mentioned before, we teach classes for all the models, and I don't care if somebody's found a film camera that they bought on eBay and they want to get into film photography. I'm more than happy to sit down and show them the ropes on that as well. So there's a lot of offerings out there. You got to do your due diligence. And, again, the first question is, what do you want to shoot? And then let that guide the equipment choice. But the important thing is you don't have to have the best and most expensive camera gear to get the best pictures. The true artist is the one behind the camera, not the camera. Technology definitely helps, but it's first and foremost the photographer. So get yourself as knowledgeable as you can, and then let that guide your equipment selection. Is that helpful? Is that kind of what you were looking for?
Yeah, no, that is a great answer. That being said, what is you said you're kind of a Canon guy. What's your go-to equipment?
Well, currently, I've still got a foot in both ponds here because I still have a 5D Mark IV, which is a DSLR, a mirrored camera. And I had a pretty wide selection of lenses specifically for that type of camera. When I made the jump to the mirrorless cameras, Canon, Sony, and Nikon all offer an adapter that allows you to use previous lenses on the new mirrorless lens mount. It's a different lens mount. So I'm still using a number of my older lenses with my new mirrorless cameras. So right now I'm currently shooting the R7 and the R6 Mark II. Now the R7 has the smaller crop sensor. So I use that primarily for my wildlife photography because with my long telephoto lens, like my 100 to 500 millimeter lens, which is what I use for my birds and wildlife, the smaller crop sensor gives me a little more magnification, makes it a little more powerful, a little more far-reaching. My R6 II is a full frame, so it's got the larger sensor. So it doesn't give that magnification factor, but it's got much better data collecting and light collecting for like my night sky and for my scenics and landscapes and for whenever I do any portraits or or people photography, and oftentimes event photography, I might use that one instead. Now, some of the new mirrorless cameras, because that mirror always had to get up out of the way before your camera would take the picture, and it slowed the cameras down. Well, the new mirrorless cameras, they can shoot, well, my R7 can shoot up to 30 frames a second. My R6 can shoot up to 40 frames a second. A typical video is like 24 frames a second. So you're now able to shoot full resolution images faster than a video capture. So it's opened up a whole new realm for us for sports and action and birds in flight and that type of thing. So I've stayed with the Canon system. Nikon makes their Z series. Sony's got their A series, the A7 in different models, the A9. So there's a lot of choices out there. They all do pretty much the same thing. They all do it really well. Just in many cases, they do it differently. Buttons are different, dials are different. They call things by different terms, but they all do the same thing. So that's the important thing about getting to learn your camera once you make the decision, because you need to be able to react quickly. And I'm still learning all the time. I mean, I just learned something new the other day when with my camera that I didn't understand why it was doing something, and so a deep dive into the menus. It's a lot of self learning and learning by doing.
Yeah, and I mean, even like I said, I'm kind of an amateur. I've got one camera body. I'm always confused as to what's going on, why it's doing what it's doing. And then, like you said, YouTube. I learned a couple of different settings in my camera that I had no idea were even there. And it's really helped me and changed how I take the pictures and what I can do with them after I take the picture. But you had said that you're kind of on the edge about editing the photos after because of how much technology there is. But what do you do for editing? Do you have a specific software that you use, or do you try to use your camera settings as much as possible so you don't have to do anything?
Well, and I catch a lot of flack from my buddies on this because many of my friends in the club are very, very proficient at editing with Lightroom and Photoshop and that type of thing. I'm somewhat of a dinosaur, and they're trying their best to teach me and to drag me in kicking and screaming. I do very little editing. As a teacher, I'm always suggesting or striving to get folks to capture it as best they can in the camera so they don't have to edit it. Now, I'm not naive enough to know that's that maybe is a little unreasonable, because editing has been a part of photography since the very beginning. You think of the Civil War photographer Matthew Brady. He had people in pictures where they never were because of the darkroom magic. Ansel Adams, he worked magic in his darkroom in editing and changing and adjusting and tweaking those iconic black and white shots of Yosemite and his other very, very popular award-winning images. They weren't straight out of the camera. There's also editing has always been a part of it. And I do very minor editing. I typically may do a little sharpening, may do a little color saturation. Certainly I'm going to do some cropping in the frame for better composition. But I try to, in my pre-visualizing, I try to predict that in the beginning so that I don't need to do as much work. But now with the thing that concerns me about photo editing is the over editing that takes place. Things like HDR, the high dynamic range. You see some of these pictures where the sun was bright over the mountains and the mountains were in the shadow and the lake in the foreground were, all a mix of exposures, but they all now are perfectly exposed and they almost look artificial. So editing, my philosophy on editing is it's great. Many shots are improved by it, but if it looks like it's been edited, you've done too much. And so it needs to be done discreetly. I tell you, there's a scary thing on the forefront, this whole thing with artificial intelligence. This AI is making inroads into photography now, and it's got quite a few people concerned about what the future holds and what images are now going to be suspect. Award-winning images in contests now, what percentage of them are artificially generated as opposed to an actual shot that was taken on scene. So I think there's going to be some challenges ahead, and I'm certainly not oblivious to the benefits of editing, but I think folks need to be upfront and if it's art, that's one thing. If it's art and you're creating art, and that's part of photography, but in those cases where you're documenting species and habitats and habits and those types of things, I think you need to kind of do a little soul searching as to what extent you want to go. Putting animals where they don't belong, and taking out trees that you don't like, or those types of things. So I've got a kind of an old school kind of dinosaur's view of some of that, but I'm not oblivious to the fact that it's a necessary part of our craft, and some people do it very well, and that's the artist in us that chooses the path.
For a period of time while I was in the classroom, I taught astronomy, and I actually I had a planetarium at my disposal, so I was a planetarium director as well.
Oh, wow.
And through that, I did get into astrophotography. And one of the questions that I have for you, this has been 20 plus, maybe closer to 25 years ago, but we used film, and we used manual cameras where you can control the aperture, you can control the shutter speed, and then you also had the little attachment that you could, a little cable that you could open the shutter and leave it open.
The remote, yeah.
And
the bulb exposure, yeah.
Correct. And so that really wasn't tough to learn, but do the new cameras that are so digital, do they have those capabilities? I mean, taking a star trail photo, or maybe something that, because we used I had a Celestron 8-inch telescope at my disposal, and we had the attachments for that. So as long as everything was set up on the ecliptic and you had your motorized mount synced, you could get maybe a picture of a deep space object like a galaxy or a nebula. But can you do those types of things with the more computerized cameras now?
Oh, absolutely. Pardon the pun, but the sky's the limit.
Sure.
It is really, it's amazing, the new technology that's available now. With my mirrorless cameras, there's some very basic improvements that, you talk about having to hold with the remote control that had the little button with the little lock on it that
Right.
you can lock your shutter open.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now the new cameras, they have a wide range of shutter. You can do up to 30-second exposures and automatically expose for the light. You can do longer bulb exposures as well, like you're talking about, with a remote. You can run them by your phone. I mean, everything's wireless and Bluetooth now, so you can set your camera out on the patio on a tripod and do, like you're saying, do your polar alignment and all that stuff. If you've got there's tripod mounted tracking devices now that you can just set your camera on, polar align them, go back inside where it's warm and control it with your phone. You can, like my camera has a built-in intervalometer timer. So if I'm just doing Milky Way shots and I want to do a series of 20-second exposures or whatever, and doing rather than doing deep sky, I can program the camera to take a 20-second exposure every 25 seconds, so it'll just keep going, and then I can go back and sit in the car, that type of thing. So it's become very, very easy now focusing. I'm going to guess if you've tried focusing with an older camera and an older lens, infinity is not a defined thing on the lens. You can turn it to infinity, but then there's some wiggle room as to what is going to give those stars sharp pinpoint focus. Well, now my Canon R6, well, both of them, but my Canons have focus peaking and they have a focus assist. So if you're in manual focus, you can tell it to identify the area that's in focus in a specific color. And I've got mine set to red. So as I orient the lens where I want to photograph, maybe on the Milky Way or on, Jupiter or whatever, then I go and turn the lens and manually focus. And as soon as that star is in pinpoint focus, it'll pop and turn red on the screen. So there's no question. There's no worried about. We used to have to take test shots and find where that star was the sharpest, and then you'd put a piece of tape on the lens so it wouldn't get jostled. All that's gone now, but they make little pocket-sized star trackers now that you can mount on your tripod and set your camera on that will give you that equatorial tracking that you were talking about with your telescope. We've got folks in the club that are doing some really intensive deep sky, nebula, galaxy type of photography in digital, and they have taken it to very much the technical extreme where they're shooting hundreds and hundreds of frames and then stacking them all together in software that limits the noise or the interference, the murkiness in the darks and the blacks, and makes them nice and clean, and different color filters and different types of approaches. I haven't gotten anywhere near that end of the spectrum. I'm kind of a lazy, opportunistic photographer, but I've done a lot of sequences of Milky Way shots like in the Badlands or over different formations like out at Palisades, where I've actually done some light painting. And basically during the long exposure, when I'm trying to record the Milky Way core, I'm also taking and selectively popping some light into the scene in the foreground to illuminate some, like the Badlands formations or the King and Queen Rock at Palisades as an example, just to give it a little bit more of an artistic thing. It's very simple to do and fun. Quite frankly, it's fun.
Well,
and
one of the things that I've noticed with working with my students in that was, of course, the anticipation that was all on film. So we would take the pictures and then, wait for it to be developed and then come back. But the color that's actually in the night sky, and you don't get that unless you have some of those longer exposures.
Correct.
Particularly the reds are so prevalent.
Well, and we're so affected by light pollution as well too. And we're fortunate out here where we don't have to travel too far to get to a relatively dark sky. But, if you try to do something like that around a community or whatever, there's a lot of light pollution that really obscures some of that star detail. But a place like the Badlands or even as far over west as Freeman, that area gets as very dark sky out there in the rural part of the state. You can see a lot more detail, and the camera will pick up much more detail than what the eye typically sees.
Exactly.
And that's kind of an eye opener to folks to see. Now, once they see how easy it is to do, and then seeing the results. I do a couple night sky workshops over at Pipestone Monument each year. I think we've got one coming up in May, and then we do one in September, where we actually go out and do some night sky stuff there, and do some light painting at the Winnewissie Falls. And it's a fun time just to, to see folks go, aha, I get it now. But it's relatively easy to do without a lot of specialized equipment. But if you want to take it to the extreme, the telescopes, the technology is there to do some beautiful, beautiful things.
Right. You mentioned earlier your wife and you have traveled extensively to the different national parks and throughout the country, and that's one of the things I think that I would emphasize is in my travels since my wife passed away in November of 19. I've traveled a lot, particularly from Nebraska west through New Mexico. I've driven from San Diego to north of Seattle to Oak Harbor, Washington, and I've made that trip, I think, now 4 times. And I've gone through the Rocky Mountains, and so I've seen a lot of the country, and the world our country is vast. There are a lot of different opportunities there for someone to photograph and but the other thing that I wanted to mention with regard to that was that we had a guest a couple of weeks ago that talked about when they hunt, they would put descriptive things on their when they would freeze the game that they harvested, more descriptive things about the day and maybe the weather and maybe something. And then when they would take that out to prepare it, it became a reflection of that moment in time. And that's what photography does. It's a moment in time that you can go back to, you can relive and enjoy again. So I think more than anything else, and I think you would agree that would be one of those things that could get people interested in photography as well. And our podcast is called Healing Through the Hunt. And you mentioned this earlier when we talked out at Good Earth, but how in your mind, how can photography be a healing hobby?
Well, I think anything that gets you, I think anything that gets you away from what is concerning you in the moment. I mean, if your job is stressful or very demanding, family dynamics, all those types of things, that's life, and we have to deal with those things. But it's always nice to have I think a little bit of a respite at a time or two where you can just sneak away to do something that's creative, that kind of exercises the other parts of your brain that aren't being overworked, and just to breathe in some fresh air and get some sunshine and just be alone with your thoughts. I find that very enjoyable. I'll be doing a workshop out in the Black Hills, and I always tend to add a day at the front and a day at the back just to, go hang out somewhere. I've got a couple favorite places in Custer State Park where I'll just string up my hammock and I'll just swing there in the wind for a while and maybe read a book or something like that, or just watch what's going on and just kind of shed the stress of the moment. And it's different for everybody, but I think that's I found to be very helpful, and even in small groups. I mean, I find that if I travel and a buddy and I just on a whim decide to go down and see if there's eagles at the dam or something like that, we'll make a half a day trip out of it. It's a nice time to visit and connect. Those are just fun times away they're a diversion from the obligations that we have. So it kind of renews you. And I think that's important no matter what you do. it's just an important time. Music does the same thing for me too. That if I need to, I just sneak into the den and grab my guitar and pick and grin a little bit. And so I think we all need to find something like that we can add to our lives and just make things a little easier.
Very, very true words spoken. I can't let you get away without being able to advertise a little bit. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that? If they want to learn more about the Sioux Falls Photography Club, what ways can people reach out to you?
Well, if they've got questions about, cameras or making the right choices or some guidance in that respect, they can stop by. I'm typically at Harold's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoons in Sioux Falls, and I can be reached at the Harold's Photo Center. It's on West 41st Street. If somebody wants to record a number, it's 605-336-0879, or I can be reached at Marty D, MARTYD, at haroldsphoto.com. And I'm more than happy to help and provide any kind of guidance and instruction or that type of thing. If somebody's interested in the Sioux Falls Camera Club, I would invite them to check out our Facebook page and just do a Facebook search for Sioux Falls Camera Club. It is a private group. I happen to be the administrator, so all they have to do is ask to join and answer a couple questions about their interest in photography, and we'll let them in, and they can kind of tag along and see what the club is up to and enjoy and learn from a lot of the postings that our members do with their images from trips that they've taken or new techniques, new equipment that they're trying out. So Facebook, I know they say Facebook is for old folks now, but it has been a very good communication source for our club. We also have a website. Again, just Google Sioux Falls Camera Club. So it's siouxfallscameraclub.com. And on our website, it talks about our meeting schedule, and it highlights some of the activities and things that we've got planned. To join the camera club is just a $25 per year per person, or if it's a couple or a family, it'd be $35 per year. And there's information on how to submit your dues and get signed up on the website. It's a fun bunch of people. We have a couple social banquets every year in May and December where we have an in-club competition just to, test our mettle, and we give some fun prizes. But it's a nice social group, and again, the focus on the club is to help folks learn more about photography and improve their skills and network with others of like minds. And a lot of friendships have sprouted out of that club. Matter of fact, there's one fellow and I that have been active with the club since the early 80s. I guess we're the sage veterans at this point in time, but we're hoping to see a new crop of folks come in and continue that tradition.
Well, thank you, Marty. We do appreciate the time, and we hope to cross paths again.
Well, my pleasure. And please, anytime you need anything else or interested in anything else, just give me a shout. You know how to find me.
Yeah, thank you for sitting down and talking with us.
Absolutely.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Well, as we sign off for this particular episode, we do want to remind our listeners that if you're in crisis or if you know someone in crisis, please dial 988, which is the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And we want to remind you that the world is a better place with you in it. And please don't forget that. So to all of our listeners, take some time to get outside, get outdoors, and experience its healing powers. And with that, on behalf of Catherine and me, until next time.